Back in the day, Namco said,
"The legend will never die."
And I gotta tell you, as we enter 2024, I really think they were onto something. It's now almost 25 years since Soulcalibur dropped on the Dreamcast, and it remains one of the greatest games I have ever played. Unfortunately, Namco themselves may disagree with me though. The franchise is currently in a bit of an odd place, and its star has not exactly been on the rise in recent years, but there was a time at the turn of the millennium when Soulcalibur ruled the world. Coming hot out of the arcades and exclusively onto the Dreamcast in 1999, this was one of the first times that a console port not only equaled the arcade original, but actually improved on it. Thanks to the processing power of the Dreamcast, we now had proper 3D backgrounds, better gameplay, new features, and even entirely new modes. Add all of that to the swashbuckling action, beautiful aesthetics, and the interesting lore of the original, and you've got yourself a damn fine fighting game. It's actually kinda tough to decide where to start with this one because there's just so much to love, so much to discover, so many little details. I guess it makes sense to give the story a quick once over first so we know why we're out here slashing and bashing. Well, Soulcalibur is a sequel to the PS1 game Soul Blade, and so it takes place in the late 1500s with a whole host of era appropriate characters from knights to samurai to ninjas to pirates. One such pirate, Cervantes de Leon, had himself a super powerful evil sword called Soul Edge. That is until a brave young knight named Siegfried came and roundly beat his ass at the end of the first game. Siegfried took the sword, got possessed, turned into a demon named Nightmare, and now all the lads are back once again to have another big tournament, and this time they've brought some new friends along with them. Also this time they're looking for Soulcalibur, which is a good sword said to counteract the evil effects of Soul Edge. That is really all you need to know for the broad strokes, but we will circle back to character lore later as most of the folks here actually have pretty interesting backstories. Namco actually added a surprising amount of depth to the character profiles and stage descriptions, so we'll have a look. But of course, we're here to fight, and boy howdy do we fight. This is the first 3D fighting game to really feel properly 3D as you're moving around due to the introduction of the 8-way run, basically meaning that wherever you press is where your dude's gonna go. It's stuff we take very much for granted in any modern 3D fighter, but it did debut here. Prior to this, we still had Virtua Fighter, Tekken et al, all being good and fun 3D fighting games, but any movement along the Z-axis felt kinda clunky and fiddly. There's nothing too revolutionary about the matches themselves, we're slapping our opponent about, trying to get them knocked out or ringed out before the time's out, but the sheer amount of strikes, slashes, kicks, throws, parries, counters and so on at your disposal make the whole thing a joy to immerse yourself in. Even now I still stumble across moves and combos that I've never seen before. But it's really this superb mix of fighting styles where the game really shines. As a child of the 80s growing up in the 90s, I was obsessed with martial arts thanks to its prominence in the pop culture of the time. So seeing super badass characters here doing fluid katas with nunchucks, bow staffs, katanas and the like really blew my tiny little mind. The movement all looks super fluid, whether in the demonstrations or in actual combat, and it's incredibly intuitive. You can get pretty far in Soulcalibur just button bashing, but equally there's a lot of strategy and tactical consideration to ponder if you really want to master the game. And there is plenty of incentive to clock up a large playtime too. Obviously versus mode is always great if you want a quick tourney with friends, but also this is one of the first fighting games outside of Soul Edge that I felt really catered for the solo game enjoyer. You have all the standard fare you'd expect, arcade mode, time attack, survival mode, etc, but the real star of the show here for me is Mission Battle. Building on the Edgemaster mode from Soul Blade, this one leans into the narrative and lore to give you the feeling of a big globe-trotting journey. You travel to many different locations in the world, take on missions, buy concept art and unlock new locations until you've completed your quest. In Wireframe, this essentially boils down to just a series of versus matches with different stipulations, but the joy of it all comes from that adventurous flavour. Just having a world map available and seeing it gradually fill up with places to go gives the narrative a sense of scale and importance. But then on top of that, we do get some D&D Dungeon Master style text to scroll through between each encounter that sort of explains why we've come to that particular part of the world and what exactly happened for us to end up in this fight. Everybody's mileage is probably going to vary on this kind of stuff, but I am an absolute hog for it. And I do prefer a quick text scroll like this to the modern fighting game equivalent of giving me a 20-minute Metal Gear Solid cutscene between every match. I don't need that. Each match here is going to net you points, which you can use to buy art cards. Now I don't normally give a heck about concept art, but the variety on offer here is pretty commendable, and generally the pictures all do something to expand the lore or the characterization. Check out this very ominous shot of Yoshimitsu here stepping out of the shoji, leaving some sort of massacre in his wake. Pretty evocative stuff, I think. When it comes to aesthetics in a fighting game, there are really two main things that you're going to be looking at: the characters themselves and the stages where they fight. Thankfully, this game knocks out of the park with a superb roster of weirdos and heroes, as well as some incredibly attractive locales to scrap in. Let's start off with Mitsurugi, who's kind of the poster boy for this series. He's standing here in Takamatsu Castle whilst there's a siege going on. We can see the battle in the background, and the stage itself is supposed to be some sort of raft. Our boy is sailing out to join his comrades in the fray. In many ways, Mitsurugi's a fairly typical samurai hero archetype, but he's very well realised and he has a bit more going on than you might expect at a glance. In his profile, we can learn how he was defeated in front of his lord by a rifleman, something that happened back on the PS1, and now he's sworn to prove himself by defeating Nightmare and claiming the ultimate weapon. But where this gets really interesting is if we scoot on over to Taki's section, we can actually get some extra information on the homie Mitsurugi. In this stage, Hoko Temple, we get a brief historical note about Katanagari, which was a law enacted in Japan around this time to take away weapons from the peasantry. But it also tells us that Mitsurugi was once a poor farmer who worked his way up to become a samurai before this law was enacted. And so now, by reading this stage description for a totally different and fairly unrelated character, I have now learned something interesting about Mitsurugi. I don't really expect FromSoft style hidden lore in my brawlers, but I'll certainly take it. Every stage in the game looks absolutely gorgeous too. A lot of huge pristine spaces with great attention to detail. Enormous marble palaces, windswept harbours, glorious sunsets, sprawling deserts. But the descriptions are all equally interesting. Seongmina's stage, the Maze of the Dead, tells of an underground chasm said to be the entrance to Hades, and any treasure hunters who go down there never return. It's a totally unnecessary detail which has absolutely no bearing on the narrative of this game, but it's just some very cool world building, and I am here for that. No doubt the game is an aesthetic triumph. Even if the graphics are no longer as impressive as they once were, there's still something incredibly satisfying about the spectacle of it all. It is, for want of a better word, epic. Genuinely so, in the traditional sense. The soundtrack stands out as a testament to this too, full of pomp and bombast, but executed in a varied and interesting way. There's none of that anonymous orchestral soup that you get these days sometimes with AAA titles when they try to be epic. Soulcalibur manages to maintain personality in every song. Xianghua's theme, for instance, has urgent impact hits and heavy percussion throughout, but the melody itself sounds like it's played on the erhu, a traditional Chinese fiddle, which fits not only her character but also the stage. Xianghua is a member of the Imperial Guard in China, but she's also an accomplished dancer, hence her floaty, flowy style of movement. And the music is regal and authoritative, but it's also smooth and elegant. We're here in the Emperor's Garden, with its grand pagodas and patterned stone tiles, but all around us the water is calm and tranquil whilst cherry blossoms fall softly in the breeze, and the music kinda reflects all of that. Likewise, Ivy is a member of the British aristocracy, and so her particular flavour of pomp is showcased with a gothic chamber music arrangement. She lives in a mansion full of marble pillars, red carpets and decoratively embossed oak doors, and yet there is something sinister about the whole place. Anne Ivy herself is a fairly dark and mysterious character too, decked out in a pretty provocative outfit that no doubt awakens something in more than a few Dreamcast fans. I guess what I'm saying is that Namco really built a world for us here. They went way above and beyond what any arcade style fighting game actually needs to do. They gave us that perfect arcade fighting game and then they said fuck it, let's make a whole sourcebook for this thing. Deep lore, rich narrative, interesting characters, and I for one am eternally grateful. The legend will never die. As usual, if you enjoyed the video, please do hit those buttons and let me know. If you want to be super generous, you can always check out the Patreon. Thanks for watching folks, and I will see you in the next one.